All right, so I'm going to try to go over the ZBrush workflow, just to go from Maya to ZBrush and back with just some basic steps. And I'm going to do this off the cuff, so nothing's really prepared, so it could go entirely wrong, right? So we're going to try to make this so that these are some giant toruses sticking out of the ground with some buildup of the ground around them, right? So I'm going to start with ground, not as a ground plane, but as a cube, so that when we move to Dynamesh, it's already watertight. And so we'll do a couple other things just to ensure that we're doing things nice and properly. So first, I'm just going to go ahead and name this, not that it really matters, but I'll take these guys and I'll go to rename and say giant toroid. There we go. So now I've got them named out, and I've deleted history, and it shouldn't really matter so much. So I'm going to go ahead and select these things and do a file export selection, and I'm going to send it to here as an obj torus land. Okay. So there we have our OBJ sent out. So next up, we have to head over to ZBrush. Okay, so in ZBrush, if you're not familiar, totally everything in here is a tool of some kind. So we have to import a tool, we have to load it, and then we can modify the tool. We have a set of tools here, which are fine, and you can import here, or you can import up here, which is just usually what I do because it's right there. All right, so we want to go to, where did I put this? Hang on. Put it somewhere. File export. Went to where? Ah, scenes. Okay. So, sorry about that. Import and tests, test Maya, scenes, and torus land. All right, so let's open that up. So what that just did is loaded the tool over here. Now I have to drag it out into my canvas. And I'm going to drag out, I can hold down the shift key and it will snap to whichever plane it's closest to. So I'm going to get it close to level and snap it. And it doesn't really matter what size you end up bringing it out. And then, before I do anything, you can't click anywhere else. You hit edit, like that. Okay. Now we can tumble around it. Now, if we didn't hit that, right, and we dragged again, we create another one, and another one, and another one, and so on and so forth until madness ensues. And to get rid of that, we just hit Command N, and it clears our canvas. Draw out one, center it up, and hit edit. So now we're back into our spot here. All right, so if you don't know your way around ZBrush, it's a left click off the model to tumble, and left click with the option key held down to move, and then let go of the option key to zoom without letting go of the mouse. So that's just one of those things you have to get used to. It makes a lot more sense with a pen, which I'm switching to now. Okay, so we have our objects, and the first thing we want to do is we know we want to sculpt this, but maybe leave these untouched. So I'm going to head to my subtool menu, which is where we keep track of all of our objects, and we can split those out by going to split and down, and we're going to choose, let's see which one will work here. I think, let's check what our group situation is. All right, so I can actually hold down Control and Shift, and I'm going to click, and that will isolate this. I'm going to click again, and here and here, and now we have, and I can turn those back on. What I wanted to do was actually get rid of this. Oops. There we go. I wanted to isolate these and then hit Control W, and this will put these into a group of their own. So everything in ZBrush happens in poly groups, and so now I have individual polygroups. And when I Control Shift click on a polygroup, you can see that this switches over to Control and Shift gives you this selection rectangle, Also know that Control and Shift give you different individual tools, but Control and Shift together give you this one where you can hide things. So if I just tap on something, other things hide, right? So, and then to get them back, I can, well, that inverses by dragging and just tapping turns it off. So it's a whole bunch of individual things that you should probably look at other tutorials to sort of flesh out. So now that I have them in individual polygroups, I can say split to group split like this and say OK. And so now I have two parts here. One which is the plane and one which is the toruses. And whichever one is selected is the one I'm working on. And I can always turn this other one off. So I'm going to work specifically on the planes, on the plane. Okay, so that's where we're going to start now. You can switch perspective on and off if that helps you get oriented. Helps me sometimes. And now I'm going to shift this plane into Dynamesh. So you can always see your active points are the points of the selected layer, and your total points are the total scene points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this mesh up by going to Geometry and choosing Dynamesh. And I'm going to bump this resolution up to 256. Oop, that's a little big. And I'm just going to hit Dynamesh. And now you can see that we have this plane has been, or this box has been almost like it's been put through a fine screen mesh on each dimension. And this is the essence of Dynamesh. So from here, we can sculpt whatever we want and re-Dynamesh it when we need the topology back, which I'll show in just a moment here. So let's say we want some buildup around here. I'm going to switch to a clay buildup brush. And you can see that if I paint on the torus, nothing happens. But if I paint down here, I can build things up around the torus. And notice here at the bottom where we have some bleed through. This is something we want to avoid as much as possible, reaching the other side. So with the clay buildup brush selected, which is a brush I really like, I'm going to go to the brush menu and go down here to auto masking and choose backface mask. Right now, this brush, right, I can paint on it and nothing happens on the back face, right? And that's going to be really handy because when you're roughing things in, you want a big brush and you don't want to be pulling stuff on the back. And that's a brush specific setting, so if I change brushes, that will turn off and on. So I can hit the S key to get my size, and I can make that bigger and smaller, and I can just come in here and start roughing in some buildup around here and lifting this around our torus, right? And trying just to imagine how the winds would drag this stuff out, but I'm just going to build it up really hard, really fast, and then rough it out here. All right. You know, who knows? I don't know if this is in snow or if it's in rocky terrain, but I'll cross that there. All right. And so at some point, when you start pulling this stuff up high enough, you're going to start seeing some stretched polygons there, right? So in this case, we can see them here. And if I hit polyline, you can see that we're getting some stretching here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just rough in a few shapes all around, and then we'll kind of address that all at one time. So get this in here. I don't want this to be a ZBrush sculpting tutorial as much as it is a workflow tutorial, but there we go. Maybe smooth that out a little bit. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, back to here. And maybe this one is dragging out this way with this little bit of build up in the front. Yeah. All right, and you can just kind of get the gist of it, rough stuff in really fast before we start dealing with any details. let me get this here. And let's say, just for the sake of argument, that we want to have some other landform here in the back that can be a little bit more accentuated. So let's get these roughed in, and then holding down the shift key lets you kind of smooth this stuff out if you want. Sometimes it's really nice to hold on to that clay brush detail. Those jaggy edges sometimes help you build out some detail. So you can go in, if you hold down the Option key, you do the opposite, so it pushes down. So sometimes you want to get that little depression in there, get these things back. Maybe that's what we want to do there. So you can kind of beat it back and get some more interesting peaks and dynamic shapes in there. All right, so good enough for now. So let's talk about just a couple other brushes while we're here. Other ones that are good are the just fun to play with would be like the snake hook brush, which will give us a good example of some extreme topology, and I'll just do that for that sake of the argument. So I just wanted to get the size up here, and I just want to make sure that I'm going to turn off my backface mask here, and I'll make my size a little bigger, and all right, so there we have the snake hook brush. Didn't pull through the bottom, and we can see this extreme polygon pulling here. So B and C for clay, and if I look at clay buildup, it has a little B here, so I can just hit the B. So I want to fix this, and there's the stretch polys, and I'm just going to hold down the Control key and drag this selection mask out, and when I let go, it's going to actually re-Dynamesh and put that geometry back in there. So I can come back in and I can start resculpting it and not worry about the problems I may have just caused, right? So here this guy comes out, and then another good brush, which is pretty cool, is the trim dynamic brush. And one of the things you want to play with when you're using these is direction. You know, like pulling out a line like this to kind of give yourself like a working line, and then cross-hatching it back and forth to build it up gives you like a pretty quick way to fill something in like that, right? So here we have this little shape here. And then, so we have the trim dynamic brush, so again, B, and then T for trim. And then if I just look down, I see there's a letter D here for dynamic, so I'll just hit D. So that's just a, whoops, BTD. So this gets really fast when you get used to it. Keyboard shortcuts are a key to this stuff. So you can see that the trim dynamic brush will help you flatten things out like this. And for some workflows, people really like beating on stuff and then waiting to the last minute to re-Dynamesh, so you get some interesting shapes in there. So you gotta check out other workflows. Like you might get some interesting rocky crags going on there. I'll flatten this out. You know, weird shapes. All right, so we're happy with this at some point. All right. Cool. Finally, last brush to kind of have fun and play with is the Damien standard brush, or it's Dam standard. So BD, and there it is, Dam standard. And usually with a pretty small brush, you can come in and add some little carving details into things. So you can just kind of line things a little bit, and again, like holding down the Option key or Control key does the does the Option key. It does the opposite. It lifts it up, so we get like a little raised ridge. So you can kind of come along edges and enhance them with this, right? All right, so we get, I don't want to go too crazy here. All right, so this is our mesh, and if we really wanted to go in and add more detail, just once you kind of get your stuff roughed in, you can pump this up to a higher resolution. And when you do that, once you re-Dynamesh it like this, it's going to project it again with this enhanced amount of detail, right? So if I click, you can see there's much more geometric detail in here. And now we can come in and add finer lines if we really want to, and work on this fine detail geometry. This is the time to go in and add with like the standard brush, just a regular standard brush here. We can do like a drag rect and load in an alpha and add some just little bits of noise here and there. And all of this can be, of course, combined with masking. So hold down the control key. Let's say I want to put a specific shape in here. I'm just going to hold down the control key and mask this area here. This will be specific kind of stuff to add. And then I'm just going to invert the mask. And now when I do this, tool is only applied in that area. So I can be a little more aggressive about what I'm placing. And then, oops, when I deselect it, there it is. Okay, so that is the general sculpting methodology. And you can see that my toruses have remained untouched. Now what we want to do is we want to get this geometry out and back to Maya, right? So we're not going to do it with the number of polygons that we have right now, because we have 500,000 polygons, and that's too much. So we'll so here is just a simple way to go about this. I want to create a lower resolution mesh with this, and then I want to add some UVs to it, and then I want to project this detail back onto it. So that's going to be our next set of workflows here. So I'm going to turn off my toruses right now. I don't need those. And I'm going to duplicate my mesh. Well, first I'm going to, if I'm all done, I'm going to turn off Dynamesh. I don't need that. And now back to here, and I'm going to duplicate. So now I have two copies. I'm going to turn off this one just so I know I'm just looking at this. And I'm going to now remesh this, right? And to remesh it, I'm going to use the Zremesher Tool. So down here, go to Geometry. Now be careful, there's two remeshers here. There's one in the subtool called Remesh, and there's one here in Geometry, which is the one we want, called Zremesher. This is a much more superior one. So you have polygon counts. You can make it adaptive is really kind of what you want. You can choose it to make it half as dense, the same density, whatever you want. Sometimes you just want to reflow the topology. And there's ways to guide this topology using curves. Where are you here? There's Zremesher guides. You can actually draw guides to make sure the topology goes the way you want it to go. That's worth a look in another tutorial. In this case, I'm just going to leave this at 5, and I'm going to hit Zremesher. This can take a while, so I think what I'll do is I'll pause the video until this is done. All right, I'm back, and here's what it looks like remeshed, and you can see that we have a topology that actually follows much of the landscape of the object, which is great, and that is precisely what we want. So to deal with this, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, we can look at where we came from at a subtool, so I can pop up to here, and you can see this is our high resolution mesh with 500,000 points, and this is our low resolution mesh with 10,000 points, just under. So, so this is great. Now we need to get the detail from our high resolution mesh onto our low resolution mesh. So I'm going to first create some UVs. So to do that, I want to create some UV islands with this mesh, because ZBrush will try to put it all in one UV island. And so I'm going to come from the side, and I'm going to create some groups, some polygroups. So we're going to switch. We're going to hold down our Control and Shift key to do that selection and the hiding. So I'm going to hide this bottom part, and I'm going to hit Control W. Oop. And I'm going to turn on. You can't see groups unless you turn on line fill. So there's one group, and if I Control Shift click outside, and we can see that I have two groups, and this looks pretty good. I'm not too concerned about it, although could probably deal with these guys not being here. So so what I'll do is I'll switch them out. Whoops. See if I can click select. That makes that go away, and then I want to well, I'm not too worried about it. We'll see how this works. Like I said, off the cuff. So we could, if we wanted to fix that, we could just Control W and with the whole thing active, and then come back in and just hide everything but the last little bit. So we'll just get this whole top section and Control W. So it groups whatever is visible, and now we have two groups. All right, look like this. To do a quick UV projection on this, or UV creation, I'm just going to go to the Z plugin, UV master, and this works only on the lowest subdivision of meshes. So there's a process if you have a different mesh in here, but here's an option. You have to do this work on clone. In this case, there is something we can do, control painting, which allows us to protect certain areas and make sure that we have really good geo in here. For example, if we know that we're going to be viewing this from a specific area, I'm just going to make my size a little bigger, and I'm just going to, whoops, turn this back to dots and turn this off. And I'm just going to paint in, you know, like protect this spot, and this spot, and I know this side of the mountain is going to be seen, so protect that and make sure there's minimal distortion there. And then for and then if you want to, the tracked means that if we need to put a seam in here, go ahead and put it, you know, right here, or put it out here if you want, wherever you think you don't care you need a seam, right? This makes a lot more sense in characters, but I'm just showing it to you here. All right, so we have this, and then it's pretty simple. Unwrap. Oh, turn on polygroups, and that will create separate islands for polygroups, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So turn off symmetry. We don't need that. It's not symmetrical. And unwrap. And so it does that. And we can say flatten just to check it out. And there is our UV group. So here's our mountains, and here's the bottom. You know, we don't really need that. We could probably just delete it off the model. But whatever. C'est la vie. So then back to unflatten, and we're back to our model. Okay, so we have UVs, and now the last step is to reproject all of our detail back onto it. So I'm going to go ahead, and to re-detail it, we need a lot more geometry. So I'm going to divide this a few times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right, so I divided this up to 2.3 million polygons, which, you know, you can't really see, but it's all there. And now we have enough geometric detail to project. So I'm going to go back to my subtools. I'm going to turn on my high detail mesh, and there it is. And with the high detail mesh above and my selected mesh, my target, whatever's turned on will get projected onto your selected mesh. So I'm going to select this mesh with this on, and I'm just going to come down here and go down to project, and I'm just going to say project all. Because this is all coming from the same mesh, a lot of this should be close enough for everything to happen. So I was going to pause this, but it looks like we're going pretty quickly here, and we should see this, yeah, converge to something like that. All right, so now we can turn off. This is our Dynamesh version. So here we have, this is the one with irregular topology, and if we switch here, You can see that here is all of our good topology, but we have all of the details from our Dynamesh projected into it. Right? So this is a win. And finally, we want to get this information out to Maya. We want to kick out the lowest resolution version of this and then get the maps we need from it. So I'm just going to, so the way to do that is to just have visible the subtool that you want. Go to Plugin, Multi-Map Exporter. We want displacement. Maybe you want vector displacement. The normal, you can have a texture from Polypaint, ambient occlusion, a cavity map, and a mesh. And then you want to come down here and check your options. Flip V should be turned on for Maya export. Your normal map, you want tangent space, smooth normals. You don't want to smooth UVs if you're like me. This all looks good. And ambient occlusion, you can set these however you want. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here and say create all maps. And I'm going to pick a location. I'll just put it here. I like EXRs. And I'm going to say save. And this is going to start exporting everything out. And depending on the complexity of your mesh, it may or may not be quick. You should know that it supports UDIMs, so you can do UDIM UVs, but not within ZBrush. ZBrush doesn't support creation of UDIMs. So here we are creating all these maps. There's a cavity map, and everything took 35 seconds for this. Your mileage may vary. All right, so here is our final set of maps. We have our Torus land OBJ, and then we have our logical UV layout. We have our, what's this one? Ambient occlusion, not a big deal. There's our cavity map, which can be useful. Here's our displacement map, so you can see all the detail in that, and our normals map. So all of that works out pretty well for us if we pop back to Maya, and I'm going to delete, or hide this rather, and I'll do an import of our Torus land. There it is, drops right back into place. And I'm going to create a new material. For this instance, I'll use something really boring, like a blin. Let's see, just so we can see the detail. Now you'll notice that that its normals are all over the place. So I'm just going to smooth those, soften. Oops. And now I can go to my blin and start adding for example, just for argument's sake, we'll load in that normal map. And it's a tangent space normal, and we'll see how this works out. And I'll load it in. It's under scenes, of course, and open. And I'm going to hit 6. And there's our tangent space normals. So with the displacement map on top of this and the tangent space normals, you'll get a lot of your detail back, or all of it back, theoretically, and you should be good to go. And dealing with this resolution mesh. So what I'll do is I'll try to get the displacement map on, and then I will I'll pause the video for that. All right, so I had a little crash there, but no big deal. So I'm back here. I brought the material in. I just did a quick Pixar Disney material, pretty boring. Added an RMS displacement to the shader group and brought in my displacement map as a scalar map here, and added the normal map as a tangent space normals. I'm actually kind of shocked this works. Typically, I would do the Pixar, where are you? The Pixar normal map here, but that seemed to work, so I'm just going to leave it if it ain't broke. So that's my really simple network. You can see this is still my low resolution mesh, and when I render it, where are we here? here it comes, and there's my reprojected detail. So coming from ZBrush, it seems just about right. And going to Renderman, so we're good. So that's the process. That gets us round trip from Maya to ZBrush and back with a couple little tips and tricks in the middle. Nothing really groundbreaking there. I do recommend going to the Z Classroom under pixelogic.com/zclassroom, and under there you'll find, if we scroll down to these courses, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff that kind of hit on everything. Getting started, texturing, rendering. These are really, really great. These first two are really critical. And finally, at ZBrush Central, you can get a lot of stuff from here, and I'd recommend going through as much of this as possible. So anyways, great tutorials on ZBrush, and really once you get used to the interface, it's pretty delightful to use. All right, so I hope that was useful, and good luck.